And I think even more basically than dreaming with the Holy Spirit is John 10:27. The sheep hear my voice, they know me, and they follow me, and we are sheep. Therefore, we should hear God's voice. And I know that's not the normal behavior of a average. I don't even like to use that word, Christian, but people don't hear God's voice, and that was the case for me. Although Anna grew up in a church where that was the norm for her, so it was a challenge for me when we first met that Anna was, even though she was a lot younger than I was, she could hear God's voice, and I'd heard God's voice, I wasn't hearing God's voice. And I think that's it should be a normal thing for a Christian, but I don't think it is. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. It wasn't an extended point. I thought it was an important point.
Aside from upbringing, what do you think? This is an opinion thing, but what do you think it is that keeps so many Christians from believing that that it can and should be normative to hear the voice of the Lord?
I'm going to go deep end here. I would say partly bad teaching.
Yeah.
I think there is an amazing evangelical tradition that we have in the Western world and also in the Eastern world, to a lesser extent, and then maybe Latin America is distinctive. I can't talk about Asia particularly. There is a tradition that God speaks through the Bible, and God is perfection. God obviously perfection, but the Bible is perfection, and we know that the Bible is translated. And I 100% believe what is said there. I 100% believe that God speaks through the Bible 100%. But I think we're limiting ourselves if we just think God speaks through a book. But there's been bad teaching over the. I don't want to go into.
I think fear is a big aspect. I think people really desire to not get it wrong. Yeah. And I think that there is a need for us to give up our control and to trust and to be willing to make mistakes. And I think listening to God has to be a process that we embrace with humility. Not, I would be wary of people who declare God has said this, or like this is what's happened. Like, yeah, I think we'd be very wary of that. There have been moments where I've had a lot of confidence in what I felt God has said to me, but I would say that that's come through the years rather than in the initial journey of hearing what God's saying. But even so, I think it's really important that we don't use prophecy or hearing God's voice as a way to control or manipulate other people, or to get them to do what we want them to do, or to back our agenda, or I think if you're not willing to hear the opposite of what you personally believe, think, or hope for, it's very difficult to hear God's voice, because God doesn't work in the same ways that we do. And so that's, I think, a big part of learning to hear his voice.
And jumping on from what Anna's saying there, I think bad experience has also been another reason that people do not want to hear God's voice, because they've seen people who are jumping and screaming and saying this is what the Lord has said, and then it doesn't happen, and people that have given incorrect prophecies and then they call them false prophecies. And so people are like, this person can't prophesy because they got one wrong, and this person, well, look at them, they're jumping around and performing like a seal, and like, how can that be from God? Because God is a God of order. And I think sometimes we, especially in the Western world, we have this understanding that it's all about the head, and I need to understand. And actually, that's not Hebrews understood through experience, through had an experiential understanding of God. And I think we in the Western, since the Enlightenment, I think we have started to understand that God is all about is this abstract Greek understanding of 1 + 1 is 2, rather than 1 + 1. Well, we don't actually know, because actually there could be different variations, and actually have we experienced in that. And I think